Welcome, everybody, to the 37th episode of
Wow.
Truth or Trend, where Dr. Vrzal and myself, Dustin Strong, take a little bit of time to kind of talk through the things that are being promoted to us as healthy in this world and examining whether or not they have a place at our table or if it is something that somebody's just trying to make some money off of. And what can we do to truly be healthy? And today, Dr. V, we found it. We've discovered this brand new thing that is a
Fountain of youth.
call. And we want to share it with all of you because this is some fascinating stuff that has come out. And interestingly enough, it has been there all along. And isn't that funny, Dr. B?
Right.
I think that we have taken it out of our diet, and that's why it's super exciting that this is a new discovery.
Right.
So we're going to talk to you about a couple of things today that maybe are words you don't hear an awful lot. One of them is adiponectin, if I can say it right. And the other is something called osmotin. Osmotin is something that is starting to gain some traction, and we thought we should sit down and talk about it before it's being added to every supplement out there, and everybody's convinced that they need to take it. So,
Right.
we just had a little fun talk about this beforehand,
We did. Hopefully we didn't burn it out before we make it
right?
public. Yes. Well, I mean, start with the fact adipose is fat tissue. So just to help, from an entry level perspective.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's all about. I mean, in the article you pulled up, adiponectin and adipokine that circulates as multiple multimetric complexes at high levels in serum as anti-diabetic, anti-inflammatory, anti-arthrogenic, and cardioprotective properties. I mean, that's a massive list right there that, would could outsell 70% of the drugs out there we were just discussing are
Right?
making tens of billions of dollars for these companies per quarter, not even per year.
Right. Well,
So
yeah,
I
that's
mean,
the next episode. Yeah, we're gonna get into that one for
right.
sure.
So it's basically, but the point is it's big industry, and it's what people are looking, everybody's looking for the fountain of youth and,
Mhm.
said, dude, is it worth spending our money? I'm willing to spend some cash on it if it's going to help me, be young and beautiful and faster than the next guy. So, but really, as we tend to keep wanting to circle back to the fact that this is just another confirmation that processing the industrialization of our foods, of our environment is toxic, right? They're taking nutrients out that then they realize, oops, that should have been in there. We're
And
talking
wow,
about
look what happens when we put it in things, right?
right. And so, I mean, I was bringing it back to, the processing of grains,
Mm.
and how now it's enriched grains. Back in the 1800s, early 1900s, they realized that, hey, the way we're processing bread now takes out all these nutrients, B1, B2, B3, iron, folate, or folic acid. Then they realized, oh, kids are having born with neurologic problems. Oh, maybe we need this folic acid. Oh, wait, no, maybe now, what is that, 150 years later, now they're realizing, well, folic acid isn't the answer. Now it's supposed to be actually folate. And they've been spraying this synthetic folic acid garbage on our breads for, 150 years now, and realizing that maybe that's not the answer. And so it's just that whole cycle of, here we go again. Here's another thing that's in vegetables, don't you know?
Right.
What?
But and I think that's a
That's
good
going to
rule of
save our
thumb.
life.
It is often helpful to remind people when they're examining things. I always go back to the further it gets from nature, the worse it is for us because we are a part of nature. And the more we
Right,
start messing with it or futzing with it or taking things out or trying to find the active component in it, the more we get lost in the dark, right?
right,
And
right.
those people that are lost in the dark, they're throwing shade at us, by the way. I heard somebody say that. The people who
Ah.
are standing in the throwing the shade. I was like, that's a but anyway, so let's talk about why adiponectin, right, is the thing that we're talking about. There are products out there that are meant to be supportive of adiponectin production in the body, right?
Right.
Because it's a hormone, right? It's a hormone and a protein that does help us with metabolic, activity. It helps us with anti-atherosclerotic, right? So heart,
Meaning protects your arteries, yes.
right? And it has all these different benefits. And the reason that people are low in it are why? Why are people low in adiponectin in the first? Because this is something our body should be making, right?
Right, right,
Right.
right.
And is it
So
because
as we were looking at the pathway, it's be in community, eat
yep,
your vegetables because that's where, the building blocks, have a healthy gut biota, gut bacteria, exercise.
Exercise.
The basically those are all basically what the pathway tells me is, if a person's not exercising properly, it's like, hey, take this pill, and then I I don't have to exercise, right? I don't have to be in community. I don't have to eat vegetables.
Right.
There's no silver bullet. Ultimately, it's kind of probably going to be the truth out of this whole thing.
Sure. Well, I
You
mean,
know,
you could make an argument, and people do often make the argument that, hey, if you exercise, you get this benefit and this benefit and this benefit, and they give you a whole host of hormonal things, and I totally agree. And I think
right?
to some degree, adiponectin is definitely on that list, right? Because that is
Hmm.
something that is going to be more vigorously activated when we have exercise, for sure.
Hmm.
Right. That's a
Right.
big piece of it.
Great point. Yes. And then
And
the other mechanism within the pathway, we were talking about A1C, right? Which means glycation, which means insulin yo-yos, blood sugar yo-yos, causing that peanut brittle kind of formation around your arteries. Ultimately, that's what A1C think
for
of heating
sure.
sugar and the
Yeah.
way that it becomes like peanut brittle.
Mhm.
That's basically what, uh, arthrogenic problems are, is, with glycation is basically, again, I just like to look at it as the heating of sugar and the way crystallizes and then becomes very damaging to the arteries. That's what, those of you that are listening that have higher A1C, that's kind of what you're seeing in your labs. And so if this is a product that could help that, there's many herbs and things that can help that. Yes, that's ultimately beneficial. Uh,
Sure.
but look at look deeper, look at why it's forming and why that's a problem in the first place.
Well, and I do think, yeah, that's one thing that I skipped in that adiponectin explanation is it's resensitizing of insulin, right? It increases insulin sensitivity, which is the opposite of what's happening when people have too much sugar. Their body becomes insulin resistant, it loses its sensitivity, and this is something that helps regenerate and turn that around in the other direction, which is really cool, right? To know that we can do that. And our bodies
Right,
have a mechanism to do that. Of course it does, right?
right,
Back to
right,
being healthy, your body's going to go, oh yeah, this is how we do business, right? But
right.
without adiponectin, we have a hard time. And so this is what led us to talking today about osmotin, right? Because
Well, let's hold that thought real quick. Look at how we resensitize insulin receptors, right? And so we're looking at the pathway here. It's, one of the key pathways, the AMPK pathway.
right, right,
Fasting stimulates that. Exercise stimulates that. It's all the same stuff we've been talking about over, for 37 episodes now. These are the things. This is the way that we resensitize insulin receptors in a healthy world, healthy environment.
right.
So again, keeping it to lifestyle, keeping it to what we can do to make adiponectin ourselves. So Osmo, rock on.
Well, yeah, well, osmotin, here's the thing is that what's going to happen is people are going to be promoted to say, look, you don't have to exercise as much. You don't have to eat those vegetables. All you have to do now is take this pill because it's got osmotin
Right.
because it mimics adiponectin in the body, right? It's something that
Mhm.
we don't make. We would get it from plants, but when we do have it in our body, it will mimic that. And I think it is really interesting to show like all of this research in here. I'll just share some of it just to kind of give people an idea of what's coming, right? Here's an article. What is osmotin and how can it prevent Alzheimer's? And then there's research on it, going against Parkinson's disease and it as well. Where's the other one here? And it's talking about how it helps with both biotic and abiotic stress, but this is how it comes from plants. Oops, and I let the cat out of the bag about tobacco in there. Sorry, I already showed.
So
But
much
in
for the grand finale.
and the conclusions here, I mean, it's interesting, right? You've got all this for the role of osmotin in antioxidant defense, in antifungal activity of osmotin. So yeah, there's a lot of things going on here that osmotin is able to do, and we get it from plants. But the most interesting thing is the reason I think it's being so highlighted is because just the lack of eating plants in the first place that people aren't getting this. And it goes back to exactly what you said in the beginning, because we're refining the foods. This is another thing that has been stripped out of foods when we're eating packaged, processed, refined garbage, right? So,
And seems like the next thing to study or research is how is the value of it in commercially grown vegetables versus organic, right? Because as we're letting the cat out of the bag on the, tobacco thing, how much are pesticides compromising, or devitalized vegetables compromising the production of osmotin, right?
right.
So that, we know there's tons of studies showing demonstrating that there's thousands of times the amount of minerals in organic vegetables over commercially grown vegetables. So I mean, just that alone, part of where we're going with this is minerals can be protective, against this. And chromium resensitizes insulin receptors, right? So,
Right.
if that's in our vegetables and not being compromised by the toxic metals, then hey, we're in good shape and we can save ourselves $100 a month on a product. Probably more than that, probably actually.
So definitely. I mean, and I think that's why you and I keep going back to getting, if we're going to be supplementing, it's whole foods, right? We're always trying to do food first with the nutrition, but
Right.
why we have such a great relationship with a company called Standard Process because they grow their food on an organic regenerative farm. So the likelihood that a lot of these things that we talk about as we discover them are probably already in a lot of what they have, right? And we do kind
Right.
of discover that as we go. Um, I'm kind of wanting them to grow some tobacco now, right? Just kidding, everybody. We're not going to drink or smoke, drink tobacco or smoke it or chew it.
So which episode's going to be on CBD now, huh?
Well,
Yes.
I want to share that with everybody who's listening that we had a conversation about this. And, in Native American culture, tobacco was revered, right? There is a medicinal thing that was going on there. And we focused on the smoking of it. And we focused on how much damage and how much death it has wrought upon the country because people are smoking tobacco. But then I always want to push back on that when we completely mischaracterize something that occurs in nature and something that was used in traditional, cultures. What else was going on with that tobacco that could be? I mean, there's all these fillers that, first of all, that people are putting
Hmm.
in those cigarettes,
Hmm. Hmm.
tons of chemicals, like you said, pesticides, right, and other junk that's being sprayed on them. And yes, you and I both know though that tobacco is a little dangerous because its ability to chelate heavy metals out of the soil. So you are also getting an exposure to lead, cadmium,
Cadmium,
right,
arsenic.
right, heavy metals. But like you taught a few weeks ago in Houston, this beautiful idea, this reminder to everyone, your your susceptibility to a heavy metal toxicity is greatly diminished when you are minerally rich yourself, right? Can you explain that concept for people a little bit? Because those who weren't at your seminar, I think it's a beautiful reminder for everybody when it comes to minerals.
Yeah, thank you for that prompt. And ultimately, most of the toxic aspect of toxic metals is that they're binding where minerals should be. So if we're minerally deficient, then there's plenty of binding receptors for these toxic metals to go in and corrupt physiology. Whereas if we're saturated, then there's nowhere on the cell, if you will, if there's plenty of zinc there, then there's nowhere for this cadmium to bind, for example. So a lot of what I do clinically is try to find, especially if it's a toxic metal that shows up that's not something that they're, eating on a regular basis or exposed to, or, cadmium in their red paint or, red ink on in their tattoo that they had or something, then I'm looking at what is the mineral deficiency that is allowing them to be hypersensitive to this toxic metal. So, and again, kind of circle it back to, I mean, I see some, as you're talking about, some of the potential benefit eating, chewing, smoking tobacco, but it pretty much always has toxic metals in there. So it's hard to get over that compromise for the potential gain.
But I don't
Mhm.
want to freak people out. But in the great state
Yeah,
of California where you live, there's something called Prop 65, which is
right.
a warning label saying, hey, there's high levels of lead in this. And it just happens to be on all the spinach that is in your grocery stores, right? It's not organically grown, right? Or even,
Mhm, mhm.
which gets really confusing, right? For people to
Right.
know that again, this is another really important reason to be doing organic farming and eating organic is because even in things as what would be normally as innocuous as spinach, or you think you're making a healthy choice at the restaurant and eating spinach, there's a warning label on it because of the heavy metals
Right.
could
Right.
potentially be in there. And so it is really important that we do take measures to make sure that we are getting ourselves saturated with minerals and not these toxic metals so that we become less susceptible over again and again.
Right, right, right. And so it probably comes, I mean, you got me thinking that when this toxic metal comes up, look at like spinach, is iron going to be the antidote for it?
Right.
You know?
Because that's right. The longer something is commercially raised, the lower the actual iron is available, and that's probably another reason the susceptibility comes in there. I mean, this is speculation,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
it's to
But
me.
I would see. I mean, I'm now kind of going to be curious of how they show up in nature, right? These toxic metals that, just like I was just mentioning for us as humans, it's got to be the same in plants. You know, where aluminum's binding up where um, iron should be, or things like that.
Yeah.
So it kind of has me thinking of how we look at plants as medicine as well.
Yes. Exactly.
Hmm.
And so to back to tobacco, because we
Hmm.
keep talking this, I think it's interesting that there was this paradox in Parkinson's with smokers, right? They were showing this 70+% reduction in lifetime smokers in Parkinson's incidence. And in the promise of lithium, that was part of the speculation is it's, hey, maybe it's all the lithium that's in the tobacco that's being so protective. But now we also know there's something called osmotin that's incredibly high in that, because that could be another piece to it that we're getting from tobacco. So, and maybe I'm just trying to make a rationale here to make my dad feel better about smoking cigars. I don't know. But, no, but genuinely, when I
Hmm.
people who come in and they are cigar smokers, that was always my first thing is, hey, make sure you're doing things to remove heavy metals from your body regularly, because that's probably exposure. But also, I think what we're trying to tell people out there is make sure that you're mineral saturated no matter what, right? That's the
Hmm.
important thing. Your body
Hmm.
needs it for all of these, and it makes you less susceptible to the dangers that you're being exposed to in other ways.
Right, right, right. Totally. I mean, and as going back to the benefit of things like tobacco, we did see that in addition to the lithium that was in there and so on, it was a resensitizing. I was thinking it was going to resensitize dopamine. It may. We didn't see that in the literature yet,
Right.
but you were talking about how it resensitized for acetylcholine processing, which is acetylcholine is a precursor to nitric oxide, which keeps those vessels dilated and open, keeps it circulating, keeps the blood going to your feet. Keeps your heart contracting properly.
Right.
Acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter of recall, and so that I call it senioritis. Trying to come up with names and things like that. That's low acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is used vehemently in exercise and activity. So anything we can do. So again, that's part of why, people get a value of perceived benefit, smoking or doing these things. But go back to, the veil and look at
Yeah.
what else, what the compromise is.
I mean, to be clear, we're not advocating for smoking, everybody. Please.
Right.
Like, do
We're
not
just trying to learn
smoke.
from it.
Right. We're definitely not saying that. But what we're saying is if you're going to say something is causing damage, we should really know what is causing the damage when it comes to that. Right. And
Hmm.
that it's tobacco, I don't think that's enough. I don't think that's a big enough answer, right? It's the heavy metals that are in there, it's the chemicals that are on there, and it's the overexposure, right? Like you always say, examine the things you do every day, right? If
Right.
he does have a cigar, like George, people talk about George Burns smoked cigars all the time. He probably had other things to maybe balance that out. I don't know, right?
Right. Right.
What I'm trying to say is that if you're doing something every day, every day, every day, and there are other chemicals in there, you have to at least acknowledge that those are contributing to some problem, and that's the issue.
Right. And so, I mean, the way I help people quit smoking is look at what they're self-medicating.
Mm,
So, for clinicians here or muscle testers, putting things in the right hand, this is energy going in. This is how's the body going to respond to tobacco, for example. And then what I would do is putting it in the left hand is like taking it away, saying, okay, what are they craving? What is the perceived value of smoking or of, taking heroin or whatever, sugar even, why are they craving sugar? We want to resensitize, which brings up a perfect example of most of the best way I find to get people off of cigarettes is stabilize blood sugar so they don't have the insulin, the
interesting.
glucose drops that cause the cravings in the first place, and then bring their zinc status up. So pretty soon the toxic metals in the cigarettes start tasting disgusting.
Mm,
So I mean
mm.
that's my biggest win to get people off of cigarettes again, zinc status and stabilize blood sugar.
Very interesting.
So that's a lot of what this conversation is. We're talking almost as if we're advocating for nicotine, but what we're doing is looking at what value people are getting out of it and
Right.
what is that saying about their health status, about what their needs are in their physical health. Mhm.
Maybe their bodies are seeking osmotin and lithium, right? Maybe that's one of the
Right,
they're reaching for that. And if we can
right,
provide them with, ways to get those into their body by eating actual vegetables, right?
right.
A novel, yeah. But again, and that's just it. It's another reason that people aren't getting enough of it is they're not eating a lot of vegetables. Uh,
Right.
wow. So blood sugar, you're going to say zinc and just balancing blood sugar for those people who are having a hard time smoking. That's a beautiful pearl. But
Right.
I would also think about the other minerals like lithium, possibly, and other micro aspects like osmotin that might be an issue.
So the most
Wow.
common cause I see for lithium deficiency is mercury. So
Mm.
again, pulling it back full circle is not as much mercury from fish. I mean, mercury from fish tends to be more congregated in the large intestine, which is great news. It's a lot easier to get out. But it's more typically the mercury from old fillings or poor dental work and so on, which is why back in the day dentists used to have the highest suicide rate, because they were so low in serotonin because of all the mercury they're exposed to, grinding, breathing that garbage all the time and putting it in, the study I saw back 20 years ago was, oh, it's because they're inflicting pain on people all the time.
Oh, really?
But
That's
but then they're actually exposed to and breathing mercury when they were working on those old fillings. So all that to say, the vaporization of old fillings is one of the causes of low lithium, which sets up all that bipolarness and suicidal ideations and so on. So then that person might smoke to have less suicidal thoughts and be happier, right?
Well, and actually, I remember a doctor telling me they think it's just because there's a more concentrated effort on actually breathing when you're smoking a cigarette, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
things that are
Yeah.
are probably there that we're not fully understanding, right? But
Mhm.
I think that's a beautiful takeaway for any of you out there who are struggling with smoking or anybody who knows it is worth looking at the blood sugar right there. That's I think worth repeating, but
Mhm. Mhm.
also examining what else they're trying to replace or.
Most cravings come in a hypoglycemic state. Well, I
Mm.
mean, that's kind of the main premise there. Blood sugar dips, it's like that's a crisis for the brain, whether it's waking a person up at night or looking for some stimulant, looking for another, sugar fix to keep the brain going. So again, that's kind of the bulk of that premise is the fact that it's that hypoglycemic, it's the hangries that create most of those cravings. Mhm.
Wow. Wow. All right, good. Ready for that's a mic drop for me right there. I don't know, but well, okay. So to wrap this up today, I think what are the major takeaways, right? Something you're going to start hearing about osmotin probably from different people, and they're going to ask,
Osmotin and adiponectin.
right, are these things that I should be taking
Adiponectin.
supplements to be able to get into my life? And the answer is almost always it's actually already in the foods you're eating if you eat whole foods, right? And
Right.
that's what's really cool. I mean, when you look up sources of osmotin, you're going to see it's in tomatoes, it's in peppers, it's in even potatoes, but you have to eat whole foods to be able to get that. And of course, exercise, right, is going to help with the adiponectin as well. And
Right.
that's ironically, that's a harder pill for people to swallow,
Hmm.
right? Than just taking
Hmm.
an pill. But
Yeah.
I think it's encouraging for us to learn that there are more and more things in whole foods that have more and more benefit beyond, what people have thought about in the past, for sure.
Right. So I guess the takeaway is eat your whole foods, be in community, because we talked about oxytocin and that sort of stuff, which is the nursing hormone. Uh,
Mhm.
Eat your whole food organic vegetables, diversity in your diet. I mean, it's kind of a similar conclusion to all these. I do feel like there could be some value in potentially, experimenting. I'm dabbling with supplements to drive this pathway as we speak,
Yeah,
But again, are you exercising properly? Are you in community? Are you eating your organic vegetables? Do the foundational stuff. Save yourself a bunch of money. Get an even better value because 2 years from now it's going to be another latest and greatest thing.
yeah,
So we're learning. We're enjoying the science and what we can learn from it. Yeah, but it comes back to the same thing.
yeah, definitely. And then again, I just want to do a little plug here to remind people this is why I regularly do these 21-day focused periods on eating just vegetables and meat and veg, right? That's all. People
Hmm.
think this
Hmm.
purification program is so complicated, but I'm like, look, if you can just for 21 days eat nothing but actual meat and vegetables, right? That's all I'm asking. It's not that hard. And just doing
Hmm.
that act, you are getting things like osmotin that you didn't even realize you were getting. You're getting all of these
Right.
multivitamins from nature that you didn't even realize. So I just encourage anybody out there who's listening too to think about that. Think of a time that you can definitely dedicate to your health and making sure that you're making as many advances in that time. And it can be just as simple as eating whole foods for those 21 days.
Mhm.
I know there's the Whole30, right, out there that people have done, and there's a lot of versions of this that have provided a lot of people with evidence and knowing that there's a lot of power in being able to do that. And anytime a new thing is discovered, I'm going to say, well, let's look back and see where it is in the food that we're eating already, right? Because I think that's what's going to
Yeah,
happen.
right. Great point.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. Any last thoughts, Dr. V, on osmotin, adiponectin, and smoking?
Don't smoke, exercise, eat your organic vegetables, right?
Bingo. All right. Mic
Yeah.
drop. Thanks for listening, everybody. Next week, hopefully we'll have some more interesting things to talk about. Take you later.
Indeed.